The CTC, the Colorado Tree Coalition, our annual board meeting is going to be a virtual meeting on October 16th from 10 till about noon. If anyone is interested in being on the board or attending that, new board members, we're always looking for people. So you can send me an email or call me. I guess the other thing I wanted to tell you, I will be sending everybody on the Front Range Urban Forestry Council mailing list. I'm going to have a new email and a new phone number. Well, I've already got them, but I only have 11 days to go. I have 86 and a half hours, and then I will be retired. So I'll just be available on my own email, my own little number. So anybody that wants to get a hold of me, I will send that out to everybody. Let's see, the CTC board meeting, like I said, October 16th, which is a Friday, so get in touch with me if you want to do that. Our next Front Range Urban Forestry Council meeting is November 14th. It's probably going to be a virtual meeting. It's hard for me to imagine things are going to get that much better now. But I will get announcements out to everybody about that. And let's see, in terms of our programs, I'm just going to run through really quick. I know Gertie's on here, so hopefully I don't blow this very much, but the trees across Colorado, we have trees ordered. We got about 1,500 number 7s and then a couple hundred bare roots that'll be coming in. So that program is going to move forward pretty much the way we've been running it before. And the same thing with grants I should turn myself on here. Sorry about that. Same thing with grants. We are doing the XL grants. We have XL community grants, XL vegetation grants, and we do have CTC planting grants, and hopefully we'll be able to offer more grants this year than we did in previous years. So that's all good information. I wanted to say, we're getting 2 CEUs for this event here. And there is a process. I will email you a sheet and we're supposed to announce the code, but I think what I'll do is if people want, I'll try to take a quick list here. If you guys want to just pop me an email at the end of this and say, hey, I need CEUs, I will send you the code and the sign-in sheet. They have a specific protocol that we're supposed to announce the code number after we stop recording the session. That's way too complicated for me and probably for Lance, so we're just going to skip that over. And send me an email if you want the CEUs. And that is pretty much what I had. I can jump around. Dana, would you like to give us a little update on the ISA?
I would be happy to. Glad to be here. Congrats on your impending retirement, Dave. That's pretty exciting. I didn't know you could, retire at 40. That's pretty cool. We should all learn from you. Anywho, so ISA Rocky Mountain chapter, doing our best to keep conversations going remotely, keep CEU offerings going remotely, and the one thing that we were able to do and we're incredibly proud of and we're incredibly excited to do this summer, in Littleton, we were one of the only chapters to host an in-person and COVID-free tree climbing championship. So we had about 40 competitors, some of the usual amazing players, some new climbers. Everyone did a fantastic job, and we really enjoyed being hosted at Stern Park with the South Suburban Parks and Rec District. So many thanks to those folks in the district working at the park, to all of our board members, Chelsea Deming, the executive director, and all the volunteers that came out, all the competitors and their friends and family. It was a really successful event for the chapter. We are in nomination season is probably one of the biggest things to talk about. So folks who are in this group who might be interested in serving on the board of ISA Rocky Mountain chapter, it's been a really tremendous experience for me. I've enjoyed it a lot, and we have 3 positions open. I'll post some information about that in the chat. I can share the email that went out to members with Dave, with Lance, with whoever can help get that out to this FRUFC community in case folks are interested yourself or interested in nominating a friend or colleague who you think might make a good fit for the incoming vice president. And that would be a 4-year rotation through the officer positions. I'll be entering my last year in service on that group as the past president in 2021. I don't know how I got saddled with 2020 as the president year, but good riddance to that one. I'm glad we got to do one really good thing this year. We had to cancel and postpone an awful lot of stuff, but are just really thankful for everything that we have been able to do. So get those nominations in, keep ideas coming for interests that you have in training that can be accommodated virtually or in small groups. If you or folks on your staff are studying to become certified arborists, Patrick Plantenberg, Patrick O'Meara. We have two Patricks. The one here in Colorado, he's been doing a great job of promoting Norman Farrow's ISA study group on Facebook. So I want to keep that recommendation going. That's been a really strong group. So anyone who is building their credentials, maintaining their credentials, and wants to connect to a learning community, that's definitely a recommendation that I would make. I will leave my updates at that, get some more out in email and in the chat to Dave and to Lance, unless anybody has any questions.
Okay, that sounds good. Ralph is out there. Ralph's going to get us an update on Epic, and I know you had the Northern Pest Group meeting tomorrow, or yesterday. Sorry, I missed that. But Ralph, if you're ready, go ahead and you can give us an update about pests. And after that, we'll talk about the biggest pest we have, which is EAB, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I can't believe that you're retiring and you have it down to the hour. So that's pretty impressive. Congratulations. So, so our update for the Epic Northern Colorado Pest Group, it kind of has been acting as the same thing this year because of COVID. We've had a really good series starting back in May in the Zoom format and with keynote speakers. And yesterday was exceptionally good. I thought it was Dr. Dan Herms from, used to be Ohio State. He now works for Davie Resource Group. And he did a great presentation just talking about the climate change and how that's going to change the composition of our urban forest. And of course, along with that comes the changes with pest that can adapt faster than trees can. So it was very good, but it was sort of doom and gloom. But that's kind of been the tone for 2020, I think, anyway. So fit right in. Next meeting, we decided to extend it into October. It will be the 14th. And Tony Koski and Allison O'Connor will be talking about some urban stressors again. But in this case, I think drought will be somewhat of their focus. It's great, anybody can join, and it is worth one CEU for each meeting. And there's quite a few people that are on the meeting today that were there yesterday. So I don't see us actually holding a plant healthcare workshop at a venue next year, but we're working on some ideas through Epic on how to maybe break it up into smaller meetings and do it virtually for as long as we need to. So I think that's about it. For those of you who hadn't heard, Fort Collins does have Emerald Ash Borer now right on our north boundary, and it seems to be in a very isolated spot, but we expect that to expand quickly over the next few years. So, yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if anybody else out there, you can just turn your mic on. Anybody have any community or reports or anything they want to throw out before we throw it over to Lance? Going once, going twice. Okay, I really appreciate everybody hanging in. I know these Zoom meetings are, well, it probably tells you how old I am, but when you do them in the 9x9 format, it kind of reminds me of the beginning of the Brady Bunch when you can sort of look up and around and stuff like that. It's always a really fun thing. It's horrible for me not to do these things in person. You know, the two things I care about most in life are free food and cracking jokes, and we lose both of them through the Zoom thing. So I'm personally disappointed in all this stuff. I really appreciate everything everybody's doing. I know you guys are probably all sick of these things too. Hopefully, I can't wait till we can get back together. It looks like that's going to be at least a couple months or whatever. So I really appreciate everybody hanging in there. And EAB seemed like such a serious thing, and then 2020 hits, and I guess it's not as bad as having your entire community and forest burned down, or 25 inches of rain, or 200-mile-an-hour winds, or COVID and all that stuff too. And with that rousing kind of commitment, Lance, go ahead and take it over and tell us what we're going to do now that EAB has burst upon us. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dave. And I'm glad you added those words of wisdom. What I'm going to do, I think more of Hollywood squares with this. So I've got Gertie to my left, Sky to my right, Allison, kitty corner, so be careful. We're going to try to do all that we can to make this fun. And kind of, Dave, I was kind of disappointed. The donuts haven't showed up yet. I think you can do, what do you call it, Uber Eats maybe? Maybe something to work on next time. But it's wonderful to see so many great faces, familiar faces. We now have 52 folks on here. So I'm going to give you some few quick things with Zoom on kind of the etiquette and stuff for us, so we can make this run smoothly in our roles and kind of running this meeting, and then we'll be off and running. So my name's Lance Davison. I am part of the consultant team. My company is the Keystone Concept, working with Davie Resource Group to do the Your Ashes on the Line project. And so Dave invited us with Colorado State Forest Service to present here today on the Your Ashes on the Line platform. We've got some great guests to talk about EAB, Sky Stevens with the Forest Service Forest Health, Laura Podarf with Colorado Department of Ag are gonna do some updates, and then we're gonna get a little bit into our, we still got people coming, this is good. A little bit into our project and where we're at on the project. I know that Allison has been attending these meetings and giving you a few updates, and we've got a little more to update as well. So I think we have everybody muted. I'd encourage you to raise your hand or use the chat function if you want to add something. I've got Allison helping me in the background, managing the faces and the chats and everything, so she'll ping me if we're missing something. We are recording this, so we'll have all your pretty faces to share with anybody that wants to follow up and learn about what we talked about. That's our agenda, speakers. One thing we did want to mention, Dave brought up when we were planning for this meeting that you're right. I mean, EAB doesn't seem like such a big deal with COVID going on, but I think that's also a big thing for us to keep in mind, that don't let it fall off the radar because COVID's going on either. And so you're going to notice the theme of us being a team. People like Dave and other people in this room are going to be retiring soon that we rely upon. And so we've got to work together as a team, because we can't rely on people sticking around in their positions forever. And there's a lot of retirements that are going to impact the EAB response in Colorado over the next few months. So a lot of theme on team. And that's about it. So any quick questions before I dive in? No hands, no chat. Good. All right, let's do it. I have a few quick slides to introduce you to the Your Ashes on the Line project, and then I'll kick it over to Sky. And I think a lot of you have probably already seen this, but I just wanted to to do it really quick to get us all on the same page with where we're at. Oh, one more warning. I am in my home office, which you're looking at the main Salmon River, which I was on this spring because my house is being demolished and rebuilt behind me. So just imagine what that looks like. You might hear some people putting in plumbing today, and I apologize for that, but we'll make it happen. So here we go. So real quick overview. A lot of you are probably involved in actually coming up with this grant. Vince Urbina is our contact with the Colorado State Forest Service. This is a 3-year grant. The project team is, like I said, myself and Davey Resource Group. And the key things that we're doing is developing a management plan template for communities, which Allison's going to show you what we have started for that. We're going to be doing ash tree inventories in cities, which COVID has really affected that. But we've got a platform ready when people are ready to start doing inventories. The wood utilization workshops, many of you were at our first workshop in June of this year, which was very successful. We'll talk a little bit about that and then what's next. And the big platform and theme I want you to think about today is our goal is to come in with this infusion of resources and funding to help transition the EAB response team to a successful long-term platform for managing EAB. And so that's really what we want to give you when we walk away at the end of this 3 years. This is the geographic area. Oh, good delay. So up to Fort Collins, all the way down to Colorado Springs. So that's the general area that we're focused in as far as the response in this project specifically. And then this is what I was talking about, the way it all kind of works. So the EAB response team has been doing this for a long time. We're infusing these resources in to develop a good compendium of resources for everybody to use. And we're going to produce the target community inventories and data to help drive future management. We're going to focus on wood utilization, and we're also going to create a web platform to be used into the future that the EAB response team will steward moving forward. So does anybody have any quick questions on that platform before I turn it over to Sky? Oh man, we got more people coming in. Bob Kane. No questions? Okay, did you see anything, Allison? We good? All right, let's go for it. Sky, you can go ahead and share your screen. And if you have any problems, I'll pop up your stuff on this end. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it. Oops. All right, well, good morning, folks. It's a pleasure to be here with you in these inconvenient times for gathering in person. It's a good opportunity to share information. And I was asked to kind of address the past, the present, and maybe speculate a bit on the future of EAB. And I want to start first by being really clear that I'm going to use the word we a lot. And this we encompasses a large number of people. It represents a lot of entities, enormous commitment of professional resource. The two probably biggest groups that people are familiar in hearing in part of these EAB conversations are going to be the EPIC, the Emerging Pest Group in Colorado, which has had an outstandingly diverse composition over the years. And of course, the Colorado EAB response team. You'll see that there's a lot of folks that serve on both of those groups. We represent state agencies, federal agencies, cities, counties, municipalities, educational groups. Really, I'm hard pressed to think of somebody that hasn't been engaged. So when I say we, keep in mind that I mean all of the people that you can think of, and probably a few that you've never actually seen actively at work because they've done so much work behind the scenes to support all of these efforts. So it would seem remiss to start talking about the past of EAB and not mention when it was first identified in Michigan in 2002, we're all very familiar with that story in general, that we suspect that it was likely introduced sometime in the 90s and was not identified or acknowledged as the source of ash decline in that area for some time, and that it likely was introduced through infested shipping or packing material. The common route for a lot of these invasive organisms to find their ways into new and naive environments. So that offset an enormous flurry of activity in Michigan and the Lake States and in Asia, where people were running around trying to figure out why a pest that was nearly inactive and almost entirely unknown in its native range, so incredibly destructive here. And I bring this up because it's important to understand that there was a tremendous amount of work that was going on long before EAB arrived in Colorado. And some of that included the study of host-pest interactions, understanding its life cycle, biology, ecology, significant periods of time in which EAB control, management, and mitigation could really be examined and field tested. And Colorado had this enormous advantage of all of that work that was done, all of the knowledge and experience that was accumulated. You can kind of think about it from like when EAB first showed up, it was just a giant blank book. And by the time Colorado was really starting to sort of prepare for what was likely an eventuality of EAB being detected in our state, we were able to really come up with some options in a playbook, if you will. So we were building this enormous knowledge base around EAB for all of the years before it was identified in Colorado. We have outstanding resources through APHIS, the regulatory agency on the federal level, and EAB.info with Emerald Ash Borer Information Network has long been a clearinghouse of the most current and up-to-date resources available around Emerald Ash Borer. So in terms of the Western United States, I mean, there was always sort of a general awareness amongst the professions that are interested and dedicated to these resources. So our green industry folks, wood industry folks, natural resource managers, urban foresters, I mean, really anybody who's kind of paying attention and is concerned with threats to trees had some general awareness that Emerald Ash Borer was a thing. And it happened to be a pretty destructive thing. And we were observing these devastating consequences in Michigan and as Emerald Ash Borer spread into surrounding lake states and activity in Canada, et cetera. So at the same time, we recognized a series of situational differences in terms of our forest type and composition, and also the significant investment in the creation of our urban forest. And we've seen a lot of pictures, particularly as we've talked about EAB in Colorado, that show just how different our landscapes are with and without the presence of this long cultured and cared for urban forest. We were also able to be engaged in monitoring, detection, and tracking activities through various APHIS programs. And we could sort of watch these programs evolve and mature and see the challenges in detection and see the lore development changes and see what was happening with trap design. So we were also involved in state engagement projects, including the Cooperative Agricultural Pest Survey. That was a program that I managed for a short period of time when I was with the Colorado State Forest Service. So we had people in the state with cities and counties and municipalities and APHIS and the State Forest Service and the Federal Forest Service that all had some engagement and familiarity with this particular program, which included the deployment of traps and various protocols associated with that activity. And of course, through doing all of this, we were continuing to have conversations about what were our concerns. Why should we be worried? Why should we be proactive about the potential nature of this pest? And ultimately, the unescapable likelihood that it was going to be when, not if. And that led to a lot of conversations about the importance of planting diversity and the role that cities and play in this urban landscape of trees, forest inventories and plans for those trees. And all of this is not remiss in the fact that we had other experiences with exotic pests on these landscapes. And just as Dave will be retiring on to other things and hopefully not leaving us entirely, but you know, some of these experiences come and they go. People retire, people move, they change careers. We have so much potential to lose institutional knowledge and that deep relationship with particular places. But Dutch elm disease is a good example of a single host pest that had a significant impact in Colorado, and that we had a lot of people on the ground with experience in responding to and dealing with. Now, as much as I hate to see all of these people that I admire and have enjoyed working with retiring, it's because I haven't really been around all that long. I've been in Colorado now for just over 11 years, and I've had a long academic relationship with EAB and other invasive forest pests, although they weren't my primary point of study as an entomologist. I did briefly consider pursuing EAB-related projects in my postdoc with some academic siblings of mine like Deb McCullough and Therese Holland. Pursued a full-time employment and won out. And I think that that's generally a good thing. Sometimes I think I would have missed a lot of the excitement if I had continued on the postdoc path. But when I came to Colorado in 2009 and joined the Colorado State Forest Service, I was quickly invited to participate in EPIC. And some of our very early outreach efforts that I was engaged in, so I can't talk about anything before 2009, but we were highlighting emerald ash borer in the Health of Colorado's Forest, a publication that the Colorado State Forest Service puts together and presents annually to the Joint Ag Committee for the state legislature. We were also putting things out in an insect and disease newsletter that I've put together. We were talking about firewood and the spread of pests, and EAB, of course, is a well-transportable pest. We were putting together brochures on other invasive insects and issues of concern for our forests like gypsy moth, thousand cankers disease, the Don't Move Firewood campaign. By the time we got into 2012, EPIC had started working on a Colorado response plan, drafted predominantly around EAB. And we had a lot of stakeholders involved from the various levels of sort of administrative capacities in natural resources, but also with folks that are privately engaged in the wood and green industries. And it was a long and lengthy process to put that EAB response plan together, various revisions, and it was adopted by the Colorado Department of Agriculture in 2013. So of course, 2013 for Colorado and emerald ash borer is kind of like the big year. And what's interesting to note is that in April, EPIC was scheduled to present to the Joint Agricultural Committee of the Colorado State Legislature on emerald ash borer and its risk to Colorado. And it was a very early audience for that perspective. We put together a program that would quickly introduce EAB, biology, ecology, and risk, but also talk very specifically about the challenges that we knew Colorado would be facing, and those specifically related to quarantine funding rules that make Colorado and much of the Western United States unique in this situation, the value of our urban landscape, and the importance and the dominance of ash in that landscape. So jump forward to June, and I think a lot of the folks present here today were also present at that plant healthcare workshop, where we dedicated a significant amount of time and content to EAB, talking about the pest, its detection, the response that would happen, the monitoring that would happen, the nature of it being a federally regulated pest, and the roles and responsibilities to the various agencies. We had some special guests, including Chad Tinkle, who was at that time the city forester for Fort Wayne, and Krista Ryal with the Canadian Forest Service. And they were both able to talk to us a lot about how those places responded to EAB, and really expand the conversation and provide these first-person perspectives. We also had panels on those expectations and procedures that Colorado would go through, the challenges and opportunities, and we were able to have conversations about the reflections. What sort of things had people learned or wish they had known before EAB became their reality? Well, and wouldn't you know it, not a great deal of time went by before we got to August, when we had the formal adaptation of that response plan. And then suddenly it was September, and if you were here, you remember there were incredible rains and flood events and a lot of things going on in September. And maybe a little on the quiet side, there was an exit hole observed on a tree. And before you knew it, we had gone through the collection of material, the enaction of the response plan, the specimen identification confirmation, and Colorado, specifically Boulder, was the newest spot to be highlighted on the Where is EAB map. In November, that same year, we were in the process leading between September and November, but formally in November, the emergency quarantine was established for Boulder County, and a couple of little segments to include all of the community of Erie and some transportation routes for green material that would by nature have to leave Boulder County. So we started with what we outlined in the response plan and organized around all of the things that we had learned from other people's experiences. We immediately started with delimitation surveys in Boulder. There was an enormous collaborative effort. So over 1,000 hours of time from 11 different agencies came together to spend time peeling branches and establishing where emerald ash borer was known to occur within the city of Boulder. That collaborative effort actually won an award from CSU, which was kind of fun to see, because I think all of us that did it learned a great deal. We relieved a little bit of stress. And if you've never been led by Carol in the safety dance, you're missing out. And while this was happening, Colorado Department of Ag was the key resource, the regulatory agency after they went through the process to have a quarantine limited to Boulder County and not be the entire state where APHIS's regulatory authority is. And I'll leave a lot of that conversation for Laura a little bit later. But CDA was really leading the charge in putting this information together with all of their cooperators. They established the quarantine, they managed the compliance agreements, and they made a plethora of high quality EAB material available to everyone that needed it in the state of Colorado. There were tours, so many tours. If you didn't go on a tour, I don't know what you were otherwise engaged in, because they were a lot of fun. Boulder hosted many tours. A lot of folks from Denver ended up going on a road trip with some of their city council members to really showcase what EAB looked like. And it's all about the power of visuals in that context. How much more can you relate to material when you get to put your hands on it, when you really get to see it in a personal way versus something like we're doing today, which is a highly informative and can be really effective, but it just doesn't strike to the center of the heart as much as getting your arms wrapped around it. We also saw a big flurry in updated inventories. People recognized where their inventories were failing them in terms of their age, in terms of the old nature of the technology that may or may not have been used. There were all of these new tools, and a lot of communities that had been planning on updating their inventories recognized the urgent need to make the best decisions they could possibly make in dealing with EAB by having those updated first. And we got some really astonishing numbers for some communities in terms of ash. For Denver, there were just under 30,000 public ash and presumed to be nearly 300,000 private ash. Fort Collins knew they had a lot of ash. It came out at about 15% of the stem basis, but that those trees contributed 33% of their total canopy and 26% of their carbon sequestration because of the nature of those trees and the size and the dominance of those trees in that urban canopy, which goes above and beyond just how many sticks there are. People were strategizing cost. We've got budget, we've got policy, we've got management plans, and all of a sudden we've got emerald ash borer really throwing a wrench into just about all of those pieces. And we saw considerable budget adjustments. In some places, communities were really successful at communicating the need and harnessing some financial support for responding to emerald ash borer and for preparing for emerald ash borer. Some communities were not as fortunate, or they just didn't have the financial capacity to put extra money into emerald ash borer. Denver was a market success in terms of being able to generate funds and redirect funds towards emerald ash borer. And you've probably seen this cat graphic before, but it's commonly used when we remember that emerald ash borer forced us to look at all of our programs through the lens of EAB and how that was going to impact the ongoing work, the planned work, and the work in the backlog. We did a lot of outreach, and I have to say that I'm a big fan of some of the real clever outreach. Be a Smart Ash is a big piece of outreach that was put together by the city of Denver and the folks that they were working with. And you started to see it just about everywhere if you were traveling along the Denver portion of the Front Range. And they were harnessing social media and putting together swag. They had news networks kind of engaged in what was happening. But importantly, we had a lot of consistent and unified messaging. Now, maybe it got a little bit crazy. And if you've never had this little nugget of I'm beautiful, I'm nasty, I'm coming to kill your ash tree and gotten your groove on, you're missing out, and you should probably check it out at least once. And I mean, we even ended up with a superhero out of some of these efforts. So I think that they did a fine job in making EAB something that could be well understood by a really diverse demographic. We also delved into research. There were a lot of questions about whether or not EAB was going to be unique in any way in the West and in Colorado. And we looked at degree day models to see how well they were working in Colorado. We were looking at the effects of wounding from trunk injections. Our growing conditions being so different in Colorado than in the lake states and other places, we were concerned about whether or not what ash trees would tolerate in other areas, would they tolerate it in Colorado? There were trials for various protective products. They were even looking at bee pollen and testing new pheromones and traps. We were also engaged in a lot of conversations around selecting suitable trees for direct treatment. Not every tree is worth saving. That's a hard call for some people to understand, but it is the nature of forestry that not every tree is suited to its site, not every tree is suited to its condition, not every tree is suited to treatment. And treatment has a place, and it can be very effective when harnessed appropriately, but it also meant that we removed a lot of trees. And in a lot of places, that meant we planted a lot of new trees. And biocontrol efforts are also being used in the state. So between 2013 and 2020, we got additional confirmations initially just in Boulder County, and later expanding across the Front Range until the most recent find in Fort Collins. The reporting protocols have changed a little bit as we've moved away from the Boulder County-based quarantine, or the level of quarantine. Ultimately, we have no ability to determine spread versus new introduction. When we have them all clustered together, it's kind of easy to think that EAB is spreading from its point of origin within the state, but we can't ever actually know that. We can maybe assume that infestations in Boulder grew over time and expanded through that system, but honestly, the fine in Fort Collins could be directly related to the population in Boulder, or it could be completely unrelated and a totally new source of introduction. We do assume that EAB is present statewide with a state level quarantine. So now at some point we all kind of lost it and we got really sick of talking about EAB, but we're still doing it because it's still an important conversation. And we did take a couple of side trips into a little bit of humor. Sometimes we made fun of local headlines that had emerald ash borer lava traveling down Highway 36 from Boulder to Denver. And of course, not to make too much fun of our dear friends and colleagues in Boulder, but when we look for invasive pests, we look in Boulder. And now we've kind of moved into this place where we're sharing the experience, just like other people shared their experiences with us. Colorado became the Western leader in response planning and modeling. We made changes to our response plan as we went through it and executed it for the first time, like in real time. We've provided assistance to Wyoming and the development of their plan. We've had invitations out to Montana. We've participated in EAB university programs. We've also been an international example of collaboration. So back to that, we, and all of the people and institutions and organizations that are represented in that we. There were foresters from the United Kingdom that were hosted in the city of Boulder specifically to talk about that collaboration. Kathleen Alexander was invited to speak at a program in Vienna as a member of EPIC and from the perspective in Boulder about the power of those collaborative efforts. And that also led to a publication on a collaborative approach to preparing for and reacting to emerald ash borer, a case study from Colorado. And I think all of those things are things to be really proud of. I'll just touch briefly on the Colorado quarantine repeal and leave more of that to Laura. But in December of 2009, it was officially repealed, which initiated a state level quarantine under APHIS authorities as the regulating agency between states. It was not a decision that was arrived at lightly. And there are some key factors that I know Laura will talk about. So the future of EAB. As of September 1, this is where we sat nationally for known locations of EAB and federal quarantine boundaries. Why the entire state of Colorado has not been outlined, I'm not sure about. I imagine that it has to do with another piece of this future conversation that I'll get to in a minute. But what we do know is new areas will continue to be impacted by emerald ash borer, both in Colorado and in North America. And we'll continue to be looking at treating or replacing trees and making these management decisions. And hopefully we'll stay engaged in this diversity talk about how we plan our future urban forests. It'll continue to drive change. From these time-lapse photos in a location in Boulder, you can see that that change can be dramatic and significant. It is a change that does not go unnoticed. So the next item that's kind of lingering in our future is a conversation that started back in 2018 about the federal deregulation of emerald ash borer. Back in August of 2020, the update was the review of public comment was ongoing. What would that potentially mean? They've talked about deregulating and spending more focus of funding on biocontrol efforts. Some agencies have responded to this proposal by APHIS to deregulate EAB by increasing their funds that are allocated to emerald ash borer. The U.S. Forest Service has dedicated more funds to EAB related work over the last couple of years. And in general, the proposal to deregulate has not been particularly well received across the Western states. So what's next? Really, it's a question of what will we learn next and how will we continue to use what we have learned from EAB and from other experiences to move into our future forests and the management of those. So that's all I have, Lance. I'd be happy to take any questions.
That's great, Sky. I've been around a while, and I learned a lot through all that you just talked about. So thanks. That's a great perspective. And would you mind if we PDF that and give a link to everybody that was on this presentation as well?
Yeah, that would be just fine.
Cool, cool. So I'm going to keep an eye here on the chat, and then people can also raise their hand and I can unmute you for questions. We've got to have questions from that.
I see one there from Tara, and nice catch. These are in fact beetle elytra earrings. Same color as EAB, although much larger. So a buprested, but not emerald ash borer.
Yes, good observation. Any questions or anything to add from folks? One thing I wanted to say, Sky, that I loved about your presentation is the we concept. And that's something that was unique. And we know when we started our project that a lot had already been done, right? The idea of this project dreamed up before a lot was done, and then the funding comes. And so it's a unique opportunity for us to take all that information and try to come up with a common thread and ability for people to see it and learn about it without recreating the wheel. So it takes a village for sure. Yeah.
I think that a big piece of the collaborative effort that really played out well for Colorado, and is something that we've always tried to express to other folks that kind of are coming to us and being like, how did you make all that work? Well, you have good people in good positions willing to have conversations around a table. And I have always said that for me, from whatever seat I've been sitting in, I have professional constraints above and beyond what I know as an entomologist and how I feel about particular things. And when you recognize those constraints for yourself, but also the constraints for your partners, it's a lot easier to understand why processes happen the way they do. What is APHIS required to do? What must they do before Colorado Department of Ag can take on a particular burden? So getting kind of through those bits before you're trying to work through a challenge the size of EAB was really important to the success that we had moving through it.
That's a good point.
And I think FRUFC is a great example of people being willing to come together, share experiences, and have conversations. So when you've got stuff like that going on, it's to the advantage of everybody ultimately involved.
That's a wonderful point. Dave, do you have anything to add? You look like you got some wisdom in that head of yours there.
I was just going to say, first of all, that was great. I mean, we have all these Zoom meetings at work and everybody always pats everybody on the back. That really was, Sky, that was excellent, because it has been a long, strange trip, to say the least, and we haven't even really started yet. So I think that was really good. You know, all these, the thing about the COVID-19 and the feds and the states and everything kind of getting passed around, that's really why we're sort of meeting here today. Is it's really hard now that it's really going to be upon us for us to sort of say, like, who is the leader, where are we going to turn, website. We'll talk about that kind of stuff later. What I was thinking we could do, I think this is going really well. If it's okay with everybody, and Lance, I mean, this is really your deal, but why don't we just do like, we'll do 9 minutes and just come back right at 10 o'clock. And hopefully Laura and everybody's ready to go. Maybe we can do one more intense hour and then everybody be done. Is that okay with you guys?
I think so. Yeah, I just want to make sure we get through some of the stuff with our project, but we might be able to do it in an hour. Sure.
Yeah, so let's just do that. So everybody, you basically have now 8 or 9 minutes to go get a cup of coffee and use the bathroom or whatever you want to do. Just remember, if your camera's turned on, don't, like, you know, no children or cats or weird stuff, okay? And we'll see everybody at 10 o'clock.
Thanks, Guy and Dave. Hello, Laura. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Very good. Have you checked to see if you can share your screen?
I will do so now.
Perfect. Yeah, I might as well tee it up, make sure that works, and then we will, when everybody gets back in 4 minutes, we'll kick it off.
Can you see? Yes, it says I'm sharing my screen.
Looks good.
Okay.
Perfect. We're
So
good.
I will stop that for the moment. Okay.
Perfect. How many people are typically at an in-person meeting of the FRUFC? We've got 56 now. That seems like a great number.
Yeah, that's a good one.
terrific.
Yeah, we have like the low, a lot of times in the summer, you know, we only have 35 or 40 people. We have had as many as 100. Actually, a lot of the stuff when Laura's there, the EAB things tended to get a really big crowd, especially you know, back in 2014, 15, and 16. But
Sure.
yeah, you know, 50 to 100 is usually where we are, which is pretty good considering, you know, that email list is 220 people. So
Yeah. Well, and like in New Mexico, our urban forest council was pretty small. And it was funny, even one of my colleagues from back there called me yesterday and said, "Hey, what are you doing in Colorado?" He must be on your guys' mailing list. So that's good stuff.
yeah, and I wasn't trying to rush either, Lance. You know, it's just what's great
Oh,
about
yeah.
these Zoom meetings are my God, it's like a 1 hour of Zoom meeting is like 5 hours of driving, if you ask me.
Yeah.
It's really pretty intense. And
Yeah, well, I've got 3 kids doing remote school, and today we had 9 scheduled Zoom meetings for
Oh,
kids. It's
yeah,
Just the kids.
it's like
Wow.
it's a whole new hellscape, honestly.
wow.
Whoa. And I mean, I have 4-year-old twins that have Zoom meetings. I mean, how is that supposed to work?
Yeah,
They
that's
can't.
crazy.
I mean, come on, professionals can't mute themselves. You think
Right.
a 4-year-old could mute themselves? No. It's not going well, and I'm gonna have to come up with some tremendous gift of thanks or some sort of recovery program for my husband, who fortunately was already a stay-at-home dad, because I don't know how people are doing this with 2 working parents. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's really hard, really hard.
it's been so much more complicated than I think that it needs to be. And there's definitely a good idea fairy running around not really thinking it through. It'll be great. We'll put them together in Zoom. They're 4. It's hard for my 8-year-old. So yeah. This is actually a nice little break for me to engage with all of you adults.
We miss you, Sky.
Oh man, I miss seeing all of you guys.
Yeah. My grandson started kindergarten at the kitchen table, so
Yeah.
it's a weird world.
Mm-hmm.
okay.
So
Well, I think
Dave, are we ready?
yeah, I think we're ready to go. Let's go ahead and take off. Like, I think that was a proper break. So we'll just kind of let her roll from here. You'll be in charge, Lance. I got about 5 minutes of stuff at the end, including the CEU stuff. And the one thing I did want to say is I'm retiring from the city of Littleton. I no longer need to work for money, which means I no longer have to let people tell me what I do. I'm going to continue with the Colorado Tree Coalition. People talk about like, what are you going to do when you retire and all that kind of stuff. I can really narrow down. I really like planting trees. I like giving away money. And I like that stuff. I don't like treating trees. I don't like taking them down. I'm not a big injection guy. I'm not a big pesticide guy. So I thought, the thing I really like, I'm going to continue doing. So that's really where it is. And like I said, I'll share that stuff with people, and that I think will keep me engaged. And I really look forward. It's probably not going to be next, I think we may next be meeting outside the next time we get together, which is probably going to be in the springtime, but I know I can hang on at least until then. So with that in mind, go ahead, Lance, back to you.
Great. Thanks, Dave. And I know they'll hold on tight to you, so you'll have more than you know what to do with when you're done with the city. All right. Well, we welcome Laura. I met Laura a few months ago and she helped us with our urban wood workshop, and I look forward to meeting you in person someday. But Laura's going to transition us from the big picture that Sky gave us to a little bit of the fun of what we get to look forward to as we continue to wrestle with EAB. So Laura, take it away.
Thank you, Lance, and thanks everybody. I'm glad to be joining you. Let me share my screen and start this. Can you all see that? Okay. So as Lance mentioned, I was asked to follow Sky's wonderful recap of how we got to where we are today. And all the wonderful pats on the back that I believe we can all give each other. So what is next? I want to reiterate the we that Sky mentioned. It's a very, very important as I talk about, as I was asked to, the role that Colorado Department of Agriculture played in the Colorado EAB response team, and what is on the horizon. There are changes, of course, and I want to reiterate that change is a normal course of action. This, I believe, is a positive change. As you can see from the quarantine map that I've put here, and the kind of progression of EAB detections that we experienced between 2013 and 2020. I'll get to 2020 in a second. The quarantine, for many reasons, was not working. And we adopted this quarantine knowing that EAB was a pest that we would probably not be able to successfully quarantine based on the information coming to us from other states. However, this quarantine allowed us to perhaps message the importance of dealing with a very high-risk pest in a different manner than we were able to message and talk about other pests that are perhaps a little bit more benign. Sky also mentioned that there is a movement, a front and stakeholder input being gathered from the federal side to actually deregulate the pest on the federal level. And as Colorado determined through stakeholder input, the lack of budget, the Colorado Department of Agriculture expended a lot of money, and I'm not trying to discount the amount of money and resources that other members of the team expended as well. This was a definite collaborative effort, but this was a very, very expensive effort, very expensive. And the natural progression of a quarantine, which is the illegal, way to mandate detection, destruction, eradication of a pest. They are not meant to last forever. And if they are not working, then we need to determine that they need to go away, and we need to work on other management, planning, and opportunities. So as I said, this is a natural progression, and we adopted the Emerald Ash Borer quarantine at the beginning, again, to facilitate this collaborative effort, collaborative messaging, making sure the messaging was consistent among all the team members, and to give other communities time to prepare. We knew we could not eradicate this pest based on the information coming out of the lake states and the rest of the US. We at the beginning thought maybe Colorado would be different enough, but we quickly found out that we were not different enough. And the whole issue here is that EAB cannot be detected early. And if a pest cannot be detected early, then it is not able to be quarantined. So to move along in the discussion this morning, I was asked to talk about what CDA's role was. Again, not to give the impression that CDA was the only player. We were not. We were not operating in a vacuum. We were operating with all of the other team members of EAB response, again, to reiterate the importance of Sky's message. But particularly the Colorado Department of Agriculture played some significant roles, and many of the roles will continue. So I just wanted to start at the beginning. What did we do in terms of Emerald Ash Borer response and quarantine? We have several sections within the plant industry division within the Colorado Department of Agriculture. And we also have the conservation division, all of who played a role. Some of those roles may not have been as flashy. Some of those may have been behind the scenes. But in the plant health and certification section of plant industry, this is where the programs that I am responsible for exist. We have the authority to quarantine, and we did enact that quarantine as a part of the planning that we had done in 2013. We enforced that quarantine law, and we did our best to educate folks regarding what the quarantine law was, to assist in making sure the messaging coming from the EAB response team was consistent among all parties. Again, we did not operate in a vacuum on this. We were responsible in a large part, again, not the only player, but the Cooperative Agriculture Pest Survey, or CAPS program, did include survey and delimitation of EAB, but again, the other players involved in delimitation were large, and based on a large volunteer cadre from city forestry operations across the Front Range. We led the EAB response team by organizing meetings. We were meeting very frequently at the beginning. We were meeting weekly and at the very, very beginning. Then we began to meet monthly, and then we began to lessen those meetings to quarterly, and then just a couple times a year. We acted as a clearinghouse for detections or fines for EAB. We were media contact. We were not the lead agency for media and communication. The Colorado State Forest Service was the lead agency in this regard. But the folks at Colorado Department of Ag, John Kaltenbach, who was dealing with biocontrol, and myself, we were often the go-to media contact for, press releases, or, the media interviews, things like that. We hosted the website. We tried to make maps and keep those up to date to communicate with the general population or public, as well as city forestry groups. We shuttled specimens on up to CSU, to Boris Kondratiev, who's the taxonomist that would do the first line of confirmation identification on an emerald ash borer specimen, or a potential emerald ash borer specimen. And when the quarantine was in place, once Boris made his determination, if he thought it was EAB, then that insect went on to USDA for confirmation by a federal identification expert in Maryland or in Michigan, one of the two. And we were also responsible for the EAB hotline. The number still to this day rolls into my desk. We had to make some changes to that number that I'll talk about in a second. But then, phones, people would call about problems with their ash trees, report that they thought it was EAB, and then I would triage those and elicit the help of CSU Extension and city foresters to go out and check on these reports. Our pesticide section, who is behind the scenes, they remain and will continue to remain the regulatory authority for licensing pesticide applicators. Those folks need a category 207 in ornamental to sell pesticide application services for emerald ash borer. This will not change, but you probably could guess that when EAB hit, the number of people applying to get a pesticide applicator license in this category rose significantly. They were very, very busy in licensing all these folks to do EAB treatments. You also need to know that Colorado State University Extension receives funding via CDA. It comes through EPA. There's funding that channels through CDA to Theo Walker to do pesticide education programs, and that will not change, but that's all behind the scenes. And we also register pesticide products, and a lot of money comes in through this particular part of the program, and so the EAB quarantine debt that my section sustained is being offset by some of the interest from the funding that's coming in from pesticide product registration. And then, of course, very importantly, the EAB biocontrol research that started and it's a collaborative effort between the federal government through APHIS, through the city of Boulder, and with CDA. So what changes? Because the quarantine is not working, it doesn't make sense. As Sky said, we didn't arrive at this conclusion to deregulate EAB lightly. We took a lot of time, effort to chat with those folks that would be impacted by the loss of this quarantine. And basically financially, we just could not keep it. And the pest flies, and it was flying beyond the boundaries that were established by the original quarantine. So it just did not make any sense anymore. So what the plant health and certification section within plant industry of CDA will continue to do, this is our mandate. We will continue to do this. We will survey for high-risk pests and disease that impact all of agriculture, horticulture, and the natural environment of Colorado. That is our mandate. And so we will not stop doing that. We respond to high-risk pests and disease introduction. That's our mandate. And while we have some hurdles ahead of us, budget issues, and things that we need to solve on a higher level to help us or facilitate CDA doing their job a little bit better, this is still our mandate, and we will not drop this mandate. In terms of the Emerald Ash Borer Response Team, we are no longer the lead. We are a member, a definite, viable member. We will continue to triage requests for identification when they come to us via email, via phone call, or whatever. We will continue to triage those requests. We'll funnel them to city foresters, to CSU Extension. We'll link these reports with the proper agencies. And this EAB hotline that I mentioned, which, at the very beginning was very, very busy. And every time a press release comes out about a new detection, the EAB hotline lights up again. This past few months during the pandemic, there were several issues that arose and became common knowledge. So I guess as a rule of thumb or a lesson learned, that if you want to make a big splash in media and get the public's attention, you need to put the word mystery in a headline. So the mystery seeds from China, or you need to put the word murder in a headline, the murder hornet from Asia. And so our EAB hotline had to be changed because of the volume of calls coming into CDA about unsolicited seeds from China. We literally had over 30,000 contacts from people who had received unsolicited seeds from China. And we had to take that EAB hotline and use it for unsolicited seeds and murder hornet reports. We still take EAB reports on that line. The pesticide section will continue behind the scenes, licensing, applicators, channeling money to CSU for pesticide education. And I highlight this pesticide education piece because I believe that many of you that are boots on the ground and dealing with the public, you need assistance in talking points and education messaging that you can use to communicate with the general public about pesticide use and EAB. And it's this CSU, it's Thea's program that we need to tap for that type of need if that exists. And of course, the biocontrol research will also continue with our conservation group and with John Kaltenbach. But that also leaves questions. As I said, CDA did not operate in a vacuum. CDA does not expect that just because our world changes slightly, that the world will collapse. No. You all have roles. You played roles in the response to emerald ash borer throughout our response to this insect, and you will continue to do so. So first and foremost, Colorado State University Extension and the Colorado State Forest Service, they play a role, and they play, they have a mandated role, a role mandated by the legislature of Colorado. They are the educational agencies. CDA is the regulatory agency. Yes, we do education. Yes, we collaborate. But the agencies that have a mandated role for education are CSU Extension, Colorado State University, and the Colorado State Forest Service. And this would include the pesticide education piece, the diagnosis of trees, and the assistance that the general public needs, assistance that certain forestry departments in some cities would need, some counties need. This can come from the CSU Extension tree teams, their boots on the ground. This can also come from city foresters as well. The confirmation of life stages for specimens that are collected, that still needs to go to CSU entomologists. We no longer need to have these insects identified or confirmed at the federal level. We can just confirm them based on the CSU entomologist. This ends up being Boris Kondratyov. Boris has threatened to retire, but we don't have a firm date. So until Boris gives us a firm date, we're going to continue to use him, but CSU would likely replace Boris, as well as Whitney Cranshaw in the future, we would hope. The media communication, Colorado State Forest Service is still the lead on this. For mapping and the website, I believe CSU Extension and or Colorado State Forest Service and or the Your Ash is on the Line project will take these initiatives at this time. And your roles as the city foresters, as the industry, your role is also education. diagnosis. You too are boots on the ground. This is very, very important. We begin our process by identifying trees that are looking poorly, and then we begin to continue that process by looking for confirmatory stages, life stages. The arborist certifications by International Society of Arboriculture, the Rocky Mountain chapter, arborist licensing that are done by certain cities. This is your role. There is not a state mandate to certify arborists or to license arborists. That's the role of cities and or associations. Everyone, we need to continue to function as the we that Skye mentioned in her presentation. We continue to work together. We continue to need to educate that everyone needs an emerald ash borer response plan or a plan of some type that would include surveillance, prevention of long distance spread, replacement and urban forest diversity, and then communication regarding the importance or the, why is it important to hire an arborist that is certified? Or why is it important that arborists be licensed in cities to do the work that they do? So our surveillance, I won't belabor this point long, but the surveillance is key, and it's one of the challenges that remains. How do we know a tree has emerald ash borer? In the West, under the challenging environmental conditions that these trees grow in, some of the locations or sites that we choose to place these trees in, we are going to see symptoms of decline for a variety of reasons. But how do we know a tree has emerald ash borer? We begin to look for key symptoms, the D-shaped holes, the serpentine galleries. But we have to, at the end, confirm that we have EAB with a life stage. And those life stages will be confirmed by the entomologist at CSU. Okay. Again, symptoms, this is where we start, but we confirm with life stages. So until someone can find a life stage in a tree, it will be unknown as to whether or not that tree has EAB or not. We need the life stage. And again, to reiterate the reporting, when that suspect tree is found, when we need to begin to utilize the resources, boots on the ground, we need to find that life stage. So that would be Colorado State University Extension, the city or county forester, the Colorado State Forest Service, or the CDA can assist in finding the right connection and the person in that one location that can assist in officially confirming the insect. Again, it will be shuttled to CSU, to the entomologist at CSU. If the pest is not confirmed, we don't have a life stage, it does not officially exist. That's the bottom line. And again, in terms of the messaging that we all collectively need to share, the education is, again, the best management practices. They're no longer quarantine law, they're best management practices. What we need to spread this consistent message. Be wary of ash nursery stock. Don't move firewood if at all possible. And the best ways to prevent long distance spread of emerald ash borer is to make sure that the trees that are removed in areas where we know the pest exists, to make sure that we are chipping them in very, very small pieces, so the double grind technique, and or treating the lumber by removing the wood and a ½ inch of bark underneath of it. And then last but not least, the focus on resiliency of our urban forests to make sure that we have a variety or a diversity of tree species. Emerald ash borer is not the first pest, it's not the last pest of high risk that will enter our ecosystem. So to kind of wrap up and to show where the next steps are, we need to pat ourselves on the back, I think, but now we need to move on. Our purpose of the EAB quarantine was to slow the spread. Check. Well, you could argue that one, but check. It was to give us time and communicate to communities that they needed to prepare. Check. We did it. Did all communities pay attention? I don't know, but we made a valiant effort. Our purpose of the quarantine was to help educate how to respond and prevent spread. Check. And the purpose of the quarantine was to facilitate communication. Check. But CDA, as I said, did not operate in a vacuum, and we did it together, and we will continue to work together. Here's what CDA is doing now. We have not abandoned the team. We remain part of the team. But we have to step back from EAB to fulfill the bigger mandate that CDA has, and that is to survey and respond to other threats, other high-risk pest threats. To do this, we need to fix some of our legislation, our statutes. And the one that we need to fix is the Pest Control Act. We've learned lessons, both from Japanese beetle quarantine and how that has spread, and emerald ash borer. And so we will be looking to gather input from stakeholder groups on how to fix the Pest Control Act. We will continue to survey and respond to other emerging pests on the horizon, spotted lanternfly. And we've also found some other new things, some Sequoia pitch moth. Is this going to be a really risky thing? We aren't sure, but we have had some introductions of that pest. So CDA's mandate is to detect these high risk or bad acting pests and disease early, to eradicate, or to quarantine. And once the pest becomes established, we're supposed to pull back. Well, you know, we can blame many things for why did a pest become established, but when it does become established, then CDA pulls back and starts to look at other emerging pests on the horizon. So upcoming, as a final slide here, upcoming, just so that you understand what's going on, and we would love to have all of your input, is that tomorrow we are going to hold some stakeholder discussions about modernizing the Pest Control Act. The Pest Control Act is what gives CDA the authority to implement quarantines, the authority to respond, the authority to eradicate. This Pest Control Act is actually a collaborative type of a mandate. It's a collaboration with counties. But we think that there may be some discussion and some changes that we need to make in order to just strengthen our ability to respond, strengthen our partnerships with counties and or cities when we do respond. So that meeting will be tomorrow at 1. And then another thing on the horizon that I don't have a lot of information on, but you all need to be aware of, is that there is more than likely going to be some legislative bills coming up that will change or that want to change the way pesticides are regulated in the state. So just watch for that and weigh in if you have opinions one way or another. CDA will have to remain neutral on that, but just so that you know that they're coming up. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Laura. I'm going to let Vince chime in a little bit from Colorado State Forest Service to dovetail on all of what you talked about. And then, yeah, we've got some time for questions, but thank you, Laura. That was wonderful. Vince.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate Sky and Laura and their willingness to participate. The information that you shared was perfect, exactly what we all needed to hear. I especially appreciated Sky mentioning the we part of this whole EAB communication triangle that we live in. For your information, the Colorado State Forest Service just hired a communications manager to replace Ryan Lockwood. Ryan Lockwood was an integral part of the communication group that participated with the initial EAB response team. That person will be coming on, knows nothing, and we're going to slam her with a whole bunch of stuff. So be patient with the Colorado State Forest Service in regards to communication that comes from, that is our responsibility. Many of you know this. I don't mean to belabor it, but I am done with the Colorado State Forest Service December 31st. And we are hiring a replacement for the program manager that I am filling an interim role that Keith Wood so graciously gave me. And I wish he was on this call so I could thank him for all of the work he gave me as he left. So we are going to replace the program manager as well. Hopefully that person will be located along the Front Range instead of Grand Junction, so that you'll be able to interact with that person in regards to all of the responsibilities that the Colorado State Forest Service has in regards to EAB. I appreciate the Davie Resource Group and all they've done as part of their fulfillment of the deliverables in the Laser EAB grant. They're not done. They have 2 more years to go, and so they're going to continue to produce workshops, information. They're going to continue to do what they were hired to do in regards to EAB. So those are my words of wisdom, Lance.
Thank you, Vince. Really appreciate it. And the other thing that I appreciate about Vince is that he is working really hard on a good, smooth transition. So like he said, hopefully there's going to be an overlap with his position for a month, which will help out quite a bit. But Colorado State Forest Service has always been a great partner of ours, and we're very pleased to be able to help in this transition. So does anybody have any questions for Laura? And Laura, if you're okay, I'll also PDF your presentation and email it out to everybody.
Yes, that's fine.
This is Dave. Sorry, I got one thing. I just wanted to really emphasize this thing about possibly turning over the pesticide applicator stuff to municipalities sounds like a total freaking disaster to me. I think it's real important that it stays with the state and the testing and stuff like that. So hopefully, especially if you agree with me, you can attend that meeting tomorrow and make sure that your local people kind of pass that up to the state legislature. How was that, Laura? Pretty sweet?
Yeah, that's good, Dave. Yeah.
Alicia Doran has a question about where we should be sending samples. Laura, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Alicia, the samples will go to Boris Kondratiev. You can access Boris through the CSU extension offices, or you can send samples directly to the plant diagnostic clinic, the plant disease clinic, with notes on there that you'd like Boris to identify this. CDA can still shuttle and run things up to Boris as well for you.
Sky, go for it.
Thanks, Lance. Just one thing I recognize that I forgot to mention when I started the conversation about 2013, I mentioned that EPIC was invited and prepared a program for the Joint Ag Committee. That did end up being postponed because of some typical Colorado surprise weather. It was rescheduled for a November event, and that did happen. But by the time we had that conversation in November, we were already in the thick of things with EAB. But it was still a really powerful conversation and opportunity to present everything that we expected to experience, and then also the reality of that early EAB experience to that audience.
And I'll tag on to that, Sky. What's important is that Colorado begin to understand that when these pieces of statute or legislation were developed, giving Colorado Department of Ag the quarantine authority, working with counties to respond to certain high-risk introductions. It was done with agriculture, traditional, row crop agriculture in mind. It was not done with any thought to urban forestry. And so it could be that I believe it's time to revisit that. How do we strengthen this? How do we make our response better for urban forest pests? And then we're going to need legislative help to do that.
And one of the many pieces that the big we worked on in these communications was transforming what are these sort of big thinking bits about the value of urban forests and the contributions that they make to our communities and our landscapes and our emotional well-being, and really figuring out how to take that and capture it in dollars and cents that make sense to some of those people that we had to reach. So those conversations about moving money around for the city of Denver, those conversations with the state legislature, how do we make them understand that this urban canopy plays a significant role in stormwater interruption, and making it be pieces that not only can they understand, but they can recognize the value of above and beyond the fact that aren't trees nice?
Very well said. Let's see if we have one more question for Laura, and then we'll move on. And everybody has Laura's contact information as well. I was just thinking, I'm glad that we have this recorded, because there's a lot of good tidbits in here for us to focus and wrestle on. How do we create that platform for what's next? So thanks, Laura and Sky, for giving us that foundation. One more question, anybody? All right. Looks like everybody's appetite is full. Thank you very much, Laura. So, construction has begun. I hope you don't hear too much of that. I am going to kick it over to Allison Steer. She is the project manager with our team with Davie Resource Group. And it sounds like she had some fun with her computer at her home office. So I am going to help her with visual aids. And Allison, I'm assuming we can still hear you. You want to jump on?
Yes, Lance, thank you.
Cool.
And yeah, as Lance mentioned, I am had to put out a fire, so I am now on my phone, but we are here. So just wanted to give a little bit more background than Lance touched on earlier on the Your Ashes on the Line project. One of the biggest components of it is completion of ash tree inventories, and we are still seeking communities that are interested in having a inventory of public ash trees conducted. So if you would reach out to me, if your community would be interested in participating in this, it would be a match through the grant with CSFS. So if you would like some more information, don't hesitate to reach out. Dana Karcher is also in this meeting, and she would also be happy to address address any questions that you may have, as that's a really important component of this project, is understanding how many ash trees in the area that we are working with, particularly on public property. Also part of the project is the EAB response team, and discussions last year with the core members is that it is an expanded group at this point. So those folks who are looking to get involved, we are kind of considering this an EAB response team meeting. So if you are looking to get even more involved, then please don't hesitate to reach out to the Your Ashes on the Line at gmail.com for more information on that. And also we have conducted one of 3 wood utilization workshops, and Lance will touch on that shortly. But if you want more information on those, also reach out. Now, the big project that's been really exciting to see come into fruition is the EAB management plan. And through discussions with Vince, we are now calling this resource the Colorado Emerald Ash Borer Steps to an EAB Management Plan. And I'm going to go ahead and share a link to this document in the chat for all of you. And if you would take some time and please browse it. And I also will provide a form for you all to provide some feedback to us via a Google form. I'll also share that link in the chat and following the meeting here. So if you all would take some time to give us some thoughts. We really want this plan to be very comprehensive, and you'll notice that there's some things that we have placeholders for, particularly when it comes to the ash tree inventories. We're hoping to add a little bit more information on the impacts of EAB based on those that data that we collect. So like I said, we really just want to get as much feedback as possible. So if you would go to your chat, access the Colorado Emerald Ash Borer Steps to an EAB Management Plan, and give us your thoughts through that Google form. That would be very much appreciated. So I think that's really all I have, Lance, on that, unless anybody has any questions.
So Allison, I brought up that site. Can people see that on my screen?
I just see the form that I gave you, or this.
Oh, I bet what I did. Let me change my screen share. Here it is. And so Allison, is there a timeline on people to get feedback from you? We'll follow up with our contact information.
Yeah.
Do we have a timeline for that?
Yeah, I think that we're looking to move forward come October. So I think people have about 2 weeks to peruse it and provide feedback. So, and thank you, Lance, you're sharing some of that page now. And like I said, just would really love to know everybody's thoughts, and if we've missed anything. You know, this is a resource that we're hoping is going to be useful for municipal arborists, commercial arborists, and homeowners. So if you fall in any of those categories and there's information that is important to you that's missing, we want to know.
Perfect. And I'll look for questions or hands raised. Looks like none in the chat yet. We'll follow up with an email afterward, like we said, with this link and also the link for the Google form to provide feedback. But our team has put a lot of work into this. Allison really scanned the interwebs to get a ton of information to make this a really good, valuable resource. And Vince has put a lot into it as well. So we'll circulate that out to everybody.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Allison. Dave, I see your face. You want to say something?
Yeah, well, I was just getting ready in case you whip it to me at the end, unless you've got something else out there. Or...
Yep, I'm going to quickly take a look at the urban wood workshops. That's a big part of the project, and then I'll kick it over to you and we'll wrap it up. How's that sound? Okay, that sounds great. Kendra asked me about CEUs. I tried to reply privately, and it said I wasn't allowed to chat with her privately. So Kendra, I will announce the CEUs at the end. Perfect. So let me bring up just a few things. So one of the big pieces of this project is standing up some kind of wood utilization platform moving forward. And so If people want to raise their hands, if they know that function, if they were at our Urban Wood Workshop, we did one in June. It was planned to be at the Colorado State University or Colorado State Forest Service nursery, but that didn't work out because of COVID. So we pivoted to online, and it actually went really well. We were able to even have a panel discussion. We told the story of all the way from what's going on in Colorado to looking at the national network and some resources that I think there will be actually a bridge to stand up maybe by the end of our project, Colorado Urban Wood Network. And then we got into our panel presentation and discussion focusing on what's going on in Fort Collins. And so what we learned from this workshop was that it was a very successful pivot. Let me see, we got a chat. Is this a question? Is there a link to the recording for the workshop? Yes, we will get you the link to the recording. I'll just jot a note. So we were able to, oh, I skipped too far ahead. Sorry, multitasking. Okay, so we were able to get a ton more people into this workshop, which was great. Over 50% of the 164 people were from Colorado. So we really did focus on Colorado, but it's also nice to be able to spread this around the country. The audience was very engaged. I mean, it even took us about 2 weeks to follow up afterward with a ton of questions from the speakers. And what we found was there's a big appetite for the next step discussions of the tree to table. How do we stand up an urban wood network? How do we support that industry? So I think it was a great foundation. The virtual event worked well. We hope to do in-person events in the future. And so we'll be reaching out to this group and our stakeholders very soon to start planning our spring 2021 workshop, probably looking at March or so, depending on the COVID situation. It may be in person or it may be online again. And we had a really good group of municipal folks and government folks. We want to start expanding that to commercial companies and the urban wood industry. So if you can help us share that, and then we'll take those lessons learned and do another workshop in 2022. Another thing before I get off with you all, I would encourage you, if you're engaged on social media, we do have a platform on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, really trying to get the word out about that. And to let you know, we've had a lot of conversations with Colorado State Forest Service about this is a project, but we have a vision, and the way we work with you all is to create a long-term successful program. And so all this is going to fold in very well to what Colorado State Forest Service already has to support you all moving forward. So that's what I have for our project. Are there any questions about our project before we wrap it up here with Dave for the meeting all together? All right, I don't see any questions. So thank you again for the opportunity to present this project, to see all the familiar faces. And man, Dave, we're getting this done in 2 hours for a 3-hour meeting. So well done.
Yeah, I think that really went well. Thanks everybody for hanging in there. So I got about 5 minutes worth of stuff. First of all, this is the Front Range Urban Forestry Council. So really what we're trying to do, and we're going to get impacted here, obviously, by EAB. So the thing is about EAB, if you go through these different sort of important little subjects, ID and inventory, we kind of went through some stuff about ID, how do you get samples of stuff, and there's stuff about inventory. That's really good. So hopefully everybody's working on that. I think that decision matrix that the Department of Ag had is still great. Hopefully that's a great tool if those of you guys don't have that to give to homeowners and stuff. The treatment options, you know, I've been sending people like, you know, Whitney's thing or whatever, but the treatment options is a pretty long, laborious thing. I'm hoping somehow we can end up with something where we end up so we have things where we can tell people what contractors are licensed to do that and maybe even what products they use. I don't know if we can get that in sort of a database. The next thing is removals. And removals are a kind of a nightmare. There's wood utilization is a big part of that. You know, where do you take this stuff when you do removals? Hopefully we can sort of figure out some places to take that. One of the things I was going to talk about just from a municipal side for you people that are out there, I used to do community development block grants. And I know, and I don't know if anybody from Aurora can tell me, but in, I think 2013 or 2014, Aurora used some of their community development block grant money to help low-income people remove dead and hazardous trees. So for those of you that have that money in your community, especially with the budgets being really tight, it is an option to go ahead and go through. Dana, you raised your hand. You want to jump in?
No, I was clapping. I thought that was a.
Oh, that was clapping. I thought,
clapping.
That wasn't raising hand. That was, it looked like slapping.
Good
Okay.
project. Yeah.
So anyway, that's one of the things in your communities. I don't know if you guys even know about that, but the big thing that I worry about in Littleton is like 95% of the ash in Littleton are on private property. And, you know, you got to get them out quickly, and it's an overwhelming thing. So I think that'd be something that's really helpful to go through. Talking about the retirements really quickly, you know, all these people, Vince and I, and all these things going through, essentially the wonderful forest analogy. Vince is like a redwood. He's still being there. What we really need is we need understory trees. So we could use some new board members for the CTC. Hopefully people that were born, I was born first Eisenhower administration. So hopefully we can move up a little bit there. So we're looking for new people, both on ISA and CTC. A lot of times it's a lot of work to do both. But for those of you that know younger people who are younger or whatever, really it's a good way to get involved and really kind of work along. Most people are pretty passionate about trees, and these are not really heavy time commitments. So hopefully you can pass the word on that. And then last but not least, on the CEUs, I'm going to give you the code. If those of you, if you guys have a sheet, they have this thing you can fill out if you do things remotely, you can send it in. But what I'm asking you to, I think an easier way, and I'm going to try this, is if you go ahead and send me an email and give me your cert ID number, I'm going to go ahead and fill that sheet out and send it to ISA. I'll probably have 20 or 30 people. I'm going to call them and ask them. The way that what they wanted me to do is send you this sheet and you guys would get the number. So for those of you that are doing it that way, the code number is RM as in Rocky Mountain -20-083. So if you want to sort of do that yourself, if not though, if you just send me an email and say, hey, this is who I am and this is my cert number, I'm going to fill that sheet out and I will get it into them this afternoon, and it's 2 CEUs. Once again, a reminder, our next meeting is November 14th, the Front Range Urban Forestry Council. Hopefully I'll get something out on that. We have the CTC board meeting if anyone is interested on October 16. Anybody else have anything? All right, Vince, that means good. Okay. All righty. Hey, thank you all. And there we go. We did a 2.5-hour Zoom meeting in an hour and 54 minutes with a bathroom break. Thank you so much to our speakers, everybody. That was really great. And I hope to see you in a couple weeks.
Dave, wait, we need your email address.
Oh, my email address. Well, usually you got an invite from me. So my email, it's dflaig, D-F-L-A-I-G, and it's at littletongov.org. So hopefully you have that in there. You can go start typing right now. Start typing the D-F-L-A-I-G at littletongov.org.
Perfect. Dave, I put that in the chat. I'm going to save all the chat. I'm going to save a recording of this, and I'll follow up with an email to everybody. So.
Okay, that works really well. Okay, so I'm just going to close the meeting. Dana, if you look over his shoulder, I got my UVA diploma right here. School was built by slaves. Am I allowed to say that?
Thank you, everybody.
Yes,
Take
yes, you
care.
are.
I will close off the meeting, and everybody have a wonderful day. Stay healthy and safe. Thanks, Dave.
All righty, thanks everybody.
Good to see you.